Okay, uh, today's workshop will come to order. We're going to be led with our invocation by Vice Chairman Lance Thompson, and then we'll stand for the pledge.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for all the many rich blessings you bestowed upon us. Please forgive us for our sins. We know there are many. Guide us and protect us and help us make good decisions for the citizens of Horry County. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good afternoon again. We want to thank all of you for being here. We want to spend this time this afternoon going over some board guidelines, and we have for you, there's a copy of an updated board team handbook at your desk, which is an updated version of the bright orange and yellow colored one that you had previously. It's been updated during the course of the last year, and these are fresh off the print manuals. As a matter of fact, he emailed me the PDF that he sent to the printer, and we were able to print it off for us. So you'll actually get the costly manual that'll come in the mail in a few weeks, but this is actually the same copy he sent to the printer. This workshop is going to be conducted jointly with the attorney and myself as facilitators, and of course we want the entire input of all board members and staff as well. Looking over our past year, and even with the years I've served on the board, after looking at this board handbook last year, I felt it was necessary for us to go through it together, almost page by page, because it has vital information for us that I think would be much helpful and useful to us as board members for the Solid Waste Authority. And so we're going to move forward with that. One of the first things I want us to do as a prelude to that is, here's a sheet I'd like for each of you to take the time and fill out. And you'll understand why I've given it to you as soon as we get started into the packet.
both of them. Congratulations, because I didn't have any luck at all.
Doing what?
You see what he's drinking? Look at that smile.
Do what?
I'm so glad to see that.
I saw that one. I thought I was looking at the wrong person.
He's not drinking a Diet Coke.
Oh, yeah.
Every Greek needs a heathen, I guess I'll stay.
It's a role I'm familiar with. Man. Neither one of y'all are even in the same class as Danny Hardy.
Been on a trip with Danny Hardy, put him down here with Jeff, he come out, cut and iron, and a dozen.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be long before he'd say you need to stop up here again.
And a bag of candy and chips.
Them little curly-Q chips that I couldn't quit eating.
I almost decided to tell him that's why he was
Yeah, but I will next time I talk to him.
And what, turn what?
Cecil, Miss Terry, you gonna have to increase the order on the, club soda.
I'm gonna talk about this. then
Yes,
I'll give it
ma'am.
to you. Everyone finished? Good. What I'd like for us to do, starting with Mike Besson, since he's way on the end, we're going to go around and tell at least one hobby or interest we have as a means of sharing some information as an icebreaker. Then we want you to pass your sheets up. We're going to have these put together as a small board pamphlet for us in terms of us so that we'll know about each other during the course of this year. Mike, tell us a hobby or interest, and then we'll move forward.
You know, basically I like about anything outdoor activities. You know, put me outside and I'm happy, and camping or boating or whatever it may be, so.
I like water sports, especially this time of year, like water skiing, kayaking, boating.
Speak in your mic.
Then it will be on record.
I used to do all sorts of things, but I honestly filled out this piece of paper by saying the thing that I enjoy most doing is work and being with my grandchildren.
I also like outdoor activities, and one of the ones I put is hiking. Hiking, going on hikes. Oh, hiking.
I guess between my two favorite sports are bowling and gardening, and neither one are going well right now. I got a bad knee, and I've gardened I haven't even dealt with this year.
Yard, garden work, and my wife's fish pond.
That makes sense.
Mine would be riding my motorcycle, taking a trip.
How many times have you been on that trip?
Not enough
Big.
recently, but I'm going next week to Memphis just to eat barbecue, and I'm turning around and coming right back.
Great place to be.
Do what you like.
Mine would be guns. I'm an amateur gun collector, gunsmith, restoring old cars. I like cars, and I enjoy participating in our state dance, the Shag.
I guess my favorite one, I've ridden horses since I was 8 and owned horses, and the last couple of years I was in an automobile accident. A man hit me in the back and popped a tendon here, so I couldn't pick up hay bales and 50-pound feed bags anymore. So I donated those last 2 horses I had to Arabians, to the DNR. They have some property where they don't even allow their workers to use HTVs, you know, the four-wheelers on there, so I donated that to them. But I've always liked boating too. I have had a jet boat, Boston whaler, and a houseboat, so I like that. It's a lot easier.
A little bit of tennis, fishing, and dancing.
Fast dance.
Fast dancing, right. The foxtrot, right. A little bit of tennis is just every now and then.
I'm gonna leave it alone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, if you pass those sheets up to us, we'll get them to staff, and they're gonna compile them for us. So we'll have, and with that, we're gonna ask Emma Roof to start moving forward. Now, y'all have to be mindful of the fact that when I get into meetings like this, I have a habit of addressing Christian congregations, so I may call you brother or sister without thinking about it. I was about to say Sister Britton, so.
All right, all right with me.
Is that not a compliment?
It is.
I take it as a compliment, that's a fact.
Okay, great. I think this is a great opportunity for everyone. It's meant to be conversational, for everyone to share their viewpoints. I think it's great that Reverend Coakley was able to get the most recent version of the book. There are a few differences. You've all been on the board long enough to realize what those are, in that this is a governmental, like public purpose type of nonprofit. And so there are some additional restrictions that apply, such as Freedom of Information Act, and there are references in here to a code of conduct, but we have the State Ethics Act and some other laws. We have the authority that's vested in the authority from county council, which in turn gets the authority to handle and manage solid waste from the state code. So we do have we have quite a broader framework that's already governing the authority than a normal nonprofit would have. However, there are major similarities to a regular nonprofit, and we're going to talk about those. And one of the main ones is, how does a board operate, and how does it operate as a team? One thing I thought I'd pass out, just so everybody has it, because when you operate as a team, I think it's important to have in mind the organization's mission statement, and I believe that may be the first slide, just the mission statement itself. Right, the next one, let's see if that's. So I think as we talk about the role of the board, the role of staff, and how to work as a team, and what the duties and responsibilities of the board are in carrying out its functions and meetings. Again, you owe a duty of good faith, a duty of loyalty to the authority. And in framing that duty, it's good to be aware of what the mission statement is, what your goal is as a board member in terms of achieving the mission of the organization. And I think sometimes we forget that mission if we don't periodically review what it is we're all about.
Good point. What year was this adopted?
The mission statement, and I don't know, Esther?
I believe it was 1990 to
Is
91.
that, okay, and it is, I think I have it in the book, so we can check that.
94.
94? Okay,
It was
got
early
it.
90s.
Okay,
So this was adopted some 20 years ago.
that's right. And in conjunction with that, Mr. Gray, keep in mind that there will be planning on the solid waste management plan, the new plan, and it probably might be a good idea to review the mission statement in conjunction with the solid waste management plan study that's being done to see, just like the book suggests, there are things that from time to time need to be updated, and the things that aren't working need to be discarded, and you need to implement new. So I thought that would be just a good framework. Then as we move on.
And before you move on, Mary,
Yes.
Emma Ruth, one thing to keep in mind is that typically a mission statement for an organization doesn't change, the vision statement changes, but the mission stays the same. Our mission is to do what is best in terms of waste management overall. Now, how we go about doing that changes.
And that is how our plan will change.
Right, right, but the mission statement stays the same. You know, your vision statement changes as time goes on.
And if you look at the components, a comprehensive solid waste management plan that is effective, state-of-the-art methods, which the authority has been incorporating, and state-of-the-art technology, and then education of the public on responsible waste management. And this is consistent with the goals set forth in the Solid Waste Policy Act that the state legislature passed.
Yeah, may I ask, of course, whatever we do in the way of, or whatever was done in the way of a mission statement would need to be consistent with our enabling ordinance
Absolutely.
of 91, as well as the Management Act adopted by the state.
That's right, and those are governing framework documents that apply to the organization. So all actions need to be consistent with the authority as delegated by council and as set forth in the state code.
Will we at a later time discuss or have a copy of the enabling ordinance 6090?
I brought the big book with me that has that in it. We had not planned to go into detail today about the governing framework documents today, and we can certainly do that at some point in time, and I have them in case there is an issue.
I don't mean to say we need to bring out another person's big book. I'm just saying that I'm familiar generally with the enabling ordinance language and certain specifics that relate to what the organization is being set up to do are part of the enabling ordinance, and we need to be consistent with that. That's all that
That's
I'm
correct.
saying.
That
Yeah.
is correct.
And Maruth, let me say this. Last year, when we first got these books, I made you a copy notebook like this. Black notebook with the cover on it. I see a few of them. And in this book was the fact the enabling legislation was in it. Mission statement was in it, the bylaws, rules of conduct, conflict of interest, executive sessions, flow control ordinance, the community waste $2.25 fee, the regional concept that we talk about in our goals, mission statement, certificate of resolution, liability insurance, and all that was in this book. So if you don't have that or couldn't find it, then we can certainly get copies of these documents.
I'm sure I have it. I just need to go find it. Do you remember the month that I would like to think that I have it organized in my office by month?
When?
July of 2013.
July 2013.
I remember you brought it back. I think you brought it back from a SWA, or it was related to anyway. We had it, and it was a very good notebook. And I just need to put my hands on it. But the question that I'm asking, you're saying is answered in this book, which we had in July of last year. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
and paragraph 5 specifically sets forth what the authority is authorized to do.
Thank you.
Okay. And that may be amended by further ordinance of council, but it is subject to that.
Thank you.
And in carrying out the mission and the scope of work authorized, the first chapter in this book is the board works as a team. All right, I believe there's a slide on that one. Okay. And I've worked with,
Page 8.
that's right, page 8. Over the years, a lot of different boards, education boards, private sector boards, public sector boards, state boards, and often when board members are newly appointed, they're not always aware of the concept of how a board operates and versus staff and each other. And sometimes we get set in our ways and we forget how the framework is to really operate, or sometimes board dynamics kind of develop that kind of muddy the way that it's supposed to operate. Basically, the concept of the board working as a team does not mean everybody has to think the same thing or agree the same way on every item of business. It doesn't mean that each board member is a clone of the other. Everyone comes to this table because they have different backgrounds. They're appointed because of things they do. You're leaders in the community. You've accomplished various things. You've served on other boards, and you're representative of different parts of the community. But when you're brought together, the organization should work as a team, not meaning you all have to think alike, not meaning votes are going to be unanimous. Votes are not going to be unanimous. However, the board, in working as a team, needs to look at its authority to act and its mission statement goals, and then properly conduct its business with decorum as set forth in the bylaws and your operating or work rules for your body, and have appropriate debate on items, and then those items come to a vote, and then you establish policy. And the purpose of a board is to set policy and policy direction for the organization. It doesn't mean that board members you can agreeably disagree. But once it comes to a vote, that is the decision of the board, and that is the action that stands, and then that is communicated to staff through the executive director. So this book has some very good pointers on how to be a team board builder. And, you know, a lot of these things applied to me in conducting my, work life as an attorney. You know, we get involved and we handle disputes all the time, and sometimes attorneys get so upset with each other. Yet, there's some very good principles in here that, I need to look at and remind myself of maybe every day sometimes. And then one is, something comes to a vote and you leave the disagreement at the board table, okay? And so really what the board should agree to do is, okay, we may disagree, but we're going to disagree in an amicable or agreeable manner. If you're on the minority side and you've argued all your points and you've made your case, yet it's not always seen this way, then sometimes, you have to accept it. I know for me, on the legal side, it's hard for me to accept not having my position accepted by the court. And we'll take spirited issue with it, but when it's time to sit down and say, yes, sir, I sit down and say, yes, sir, because, you've done what you can. And the disagreement on an issue should not cloud a board meeting or permeate everything that goes on at the board meeting at that time. You need to move from item to item in a very businesslike fashion. And if we were all perfect, we could all do this all the time, but we're not. But if you think of it in the framework of, okay, these are business items, and it's an issue of how do we best serve the authority as a board. It's not, what is my personal goal for the authority? What do I think is best? You're here to act as a board. You're set up by ordinance to act as a board. So it's the board consensus that will be reached, that will set the policy or make the decision that the board will operate under and staff will operate under. Everyone should be given an opportunity to explain their issues with the proposition and how they feel about it. And if everyone feels like they can freely exchange these ideas and not be ridiculed or not have someone get upset about it, it really will facilitate better communication among the board and help things flow in a more, productive manner. You'll be surprised at what you can get done when you can build teamwork and have things, you reach a certain momentum with your work when things start clicking along, and you have a good debate, a good decision, and then you go on to the next with the same attitude of cooperation. Other points quickly, respect, disagree, debate, question, but never ridicule anyone. And keep in mind that every person at the table has earned their seat by being a community leader. It talks about split votes, avoid forming blocks with board members. And I think you should have maybe also think about, well, we didn't form a block, but maybe was there an appearance of forming a block? So that's something to be conscious of, because everyone's sensitive to maybe being ganged up on from time to time or like that. So that should not be something that is done or brought to the table. But like it says at the bottom of page 9, no room for the strong silent type. Everyone needs to feel comfortable speaking out and doing it in the right way. And these are some very good guidelines that apply to board member participation. Remember that the executive director is a member of the board team. And as a member of the board team, a non-voting member, we need the same relationship between board members and the executive director. The same decorum, the same respect. Not everyone may agree with the executive director's recommendation. Again, it's up to the board to debate it, vote on it, and then, move on and expect staff to participate. But I think his concept of talking about being a board team builder, if you can kind of keep that image in your mind in terms of what are the building blocks of being a good board team builder, that would lead to, and I'm not saying we don't already have this already, but it's just kind of a refresher of this leads to good board working relationships. Now, do y'all want to discuss anything in this chapter among yourselves, or have a dialogue, or observations or comments?
Pam?
I did. I was thinking about what you were saying about the organizations, and when you could speak, at one time, I was on 9 different boards or committees or organizations. Most of them were very similar, and they were not always similar. And it was difficult at one time when the newspaper would come and ask you something, and what they would do, instead of quoting you as an individual, they would quote you as being on the board of whatever that issue was going. And it became a necessity to say, I'm either speaking for myself or I'm speaking for this person or that person. And then, like the League of Women Voters, you were not allowed to make comment. Only the chairman of that particular league could make comment to the paper on what you were doing or what you were not. And I remember when I hadn't been on the board long, and at the Christmas party, John Long asked me, he said, how do you work with all of those organizations, and if you have one that is different and has a different meaning and whatever? And he was right. That is not an easy thing to do, and since then I've gotten off most of those for one reason or another because of that. But I would like to know what our policy is, because every organization has a policy. If someone, whether it be a legislator or just an individual or the newspaper, if they came and asked you for a comment, what is the Solid Waste Authority's policy for who would speak to that, other than on an individual basis?
I think the rules of conduct speaks to that. That you the board as a whole can act and speak, but individual can't represent and speak for the board.
I agree with that. I mean, if someone just asked you your opinion, I would imagine you or the chairman would be the two that would speak for the board.
Right. Based on what I was told when I was here, when I first came on the board, I was told that the chairman and executive director spoke on behalf of the board, that I was supposed to keep my mouth closed when I was not the chairman.
Okay.
And that's what I was told when I got on the board.
Okay.
And
It's
I've,
been that way since I've been here.
yes, and there've been a couple of situations where maybe if it involved a lawsuit,
Right.
it would say, we'll have to refer you to legal counsel, it's a legal matter, and we are not at liberty to comment at this time. And then, you know, I would get the calls. And again, if you're asked about your opinion, and, you know, if you give one, you should say, this is my thoughts as a, you know, a citizen, this is not the opinion of the board.
The board.
And just make that clear. And then if you're the designated person and you're not comfortable commenting because it's a litigation matter or it's exempt under one of the provisions of FOIA, like confidential personnel matter, or a pending contract negotiation where a formal contract has not been executed, then you just say, I'm not at liberty to speak because this is a pending contractual matter and is exempt from, you know, due to, you know, obviously negotiation reasons or whatever, it would not be appropriate to speak at this time.
To be on the safe side, though, we just refer to the director or the
That's right.
chairman.
You shouldn't feel, so many people feel compelled to speak if the press calls them. And you don't have to, you know, like my children used to say, you can't make me talk. You know, you can't make me sleep. But, you know, you can handle it nicely and just say, I have no comment at this time. They'll try very hard, some will, to make you say something, but you have to, like, remember before you make that call, okay, where are they going with it? Is this something that is appropriate for me to comment on as a citizen at all? Or should I just refer it to the board chair or the executive director? Or if it's a legal matter, just say it's a pending legal matter and I have no comment. And it's easy, you can practice it, but it's pretty easy after a while to say, I have no comment. And then they leave a pause and you just let the pause sit there, you know? You just practice it, it's not so hard. But that's a good question, Pam. And that fits into this, you know, the role of the board. And that includes comments to the public. And you have, you know, the board should be cognizant that when they step into a board role, they also step into a position of authority, and we're going to talk about later a position of possible liability. And you also have to be aware that sometimes people may try to posture things to get you to say something that may jeopardize the mission of the authority or create controversy. And so you have to kind of be a step ahead when asking to comment publicly to just make sure that, you know, what is said is clearly disclaimed if it's not as, you know, a board chair or executive director.
And this goes for internal questions also, as far as asking staff whatever questions and wanting to talk to them. We need to go through the director or the chairman.
Yes, and we're going to talk about that.
All right, okay.
There's a chapter on that in this book, and we're going to talk about the difficulties or how it makes staff feel, because, you know, in the normal work environment, everybody reports to somebody else, and you have a hierarchy. And, you know, as nice as all of you are, it can make staff feel intimidated to have a board member calling because they're afraid, you know, they're wondering, what have I done wrong, or what am I going to do, or, so they have to go find their supervisor, Danny, and say, you know, this is what I've been asked to do. So it does put them in an awkward position, but we'll talk some more about that.
Yeah, I think that's what council does. The council goes to the administrator, and the administrator
Yes.
goes down the.
That's
Okay.
what they're supposed to do.
That's what they're supposed to.
Okay. And that's been made clear for years for them, and, but that is their protocol.
That works
Anything,
two ways, and that is that the staff needs to stay out of policy and politics just as well. I think you would agree with that. Right, Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
and
I think our staff pretty well stays out of the policy and politics, so it's my opinion of our staff.
But you agree with the statement that we should stay out of the day-to-day affairs?
Yes.
That's what the executive director is for.
That's correct.
And the executive director and the staff should stay out of policy matters or making policy without approval of the board, or getting involved in politics associated with this board or any other similar board. We agree on those two things?
Yes.
and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And I think on the issue of politics, you know, there might be a little side issue there. If the board, for example, does approve for staff to keep up and inform the board of political developments, that would be a proper delegation of authority to staff to report back and take guidance from the board as to where does the authority want to be on this political issue? How does the authority want to be represented in the General Assembly on this political issue, and carry out the aims of the authority in a political arena as part of their position, right? But that overall policy that this is a bad bill for recycling, we feel that feeling of the board, or that we feel like that hurts the authority and other authorities, staff, once that is discussed by the board, and someone's hired a lobbyist or whoever to handle that it's okay to communicate that as within policy set by the board.
I think as a whole, when it comes to the issue of politics, the staff has to represent the position that the board takes.
That's right. So the
And
board
what it-
sets that
The
policy.
board sets that policy, whatever the board decides.
That's right.
That's what the staff has to carry out, and when it comes to the issue of politics.
Right, that's exactly right.
Emma Ruth, let me make one point, and this is a point that we always made downtown. This statement comes out of the tort liability insurance policy,
Okay.
and it's very clear. Any employee of the entity designated in the declarations is named insured is an insured, but only while the employee is acting in the scope of his or her official duties. And we often talk downtown about if you get outside of the scope of your responsibility, then you're not covered. And we had an administrator years ago tried to make the point, back then Public Works was very political, and they said, if you stop a motor grader operator on a road and say, I want you to plow this road down here on the left, and while the guy's in there, he runs over someone, and you get sued, you ain't gonna be under that umbrella because you were acting outside the scope of your responsibility. And that's so stated in our insurance
And-
with the Budget and Control Board.
And that language is also in the state code in the Tort Claims Liability Act. If you go on a lark, as they call it, out on your own, get out on a limb and take action, and it results in damage or someone being hurt, and there are all kinds of ways to be damaged, the fund will, my experience has been, they will probably at least write a reservation of rights letter saying, we have serious concerns as to whether there's coverage here. Then they have the option of either providing a defense, which if there's some question about the coverage, they'll usually go ahead and provide the defense to see what the outcome is, or they can even deny providing the defense itself. And it's not just in actions like physical actions like the motor grader. We've had some cases involving statements made. One, that involved a couple of years of litigation, finally got it dismissed, but it related to statements made before or during a meeting, or even on the way back to executive session, that people overheard. So you really do have to be careful, just aware. I mean, that was an unusual situation, but you have to be aware that if you are going beyond the parameters of board policy or going out on your own, they call it on a lark, or your own your own path, someone may try to sue you for it, even if they don't have a very good claim or the damages aren't great.
Thank you.
The insurance coverage does not apply to actions outside the scope of authority. Defaming somebody is outside the scope of authority. Trying to bring about a personal result for somebody. I mean, there are all kinds of things that someone could try to couch as outside the scope of authority. But you do have liability coverage, and take a several-hour seminar just on the, aspects of the coverage, but you do have coverage. And you have the South Carolina General Assembly set up a kind of a modified sovereign immunity where certain actions, actions of the board, as a board, would fall within certain exemptions from being a tort. So your official actions, you're fine conducting business the way you should, taking official actions of the board. All right, next, let's see what our next slide.
I just want to make a comment that on bottom of page 8 and top of page 9, there are 9 characteristics that I think are vital to us as board team builders that we need to make certain that we are aware of and we pay close attention to and deal with. The bottom of page 8 and page 9, I call them 9 characteristics of good board members. Okay, our role as a board member.
Okay, here we have the board sets policy. The board hires an executive director to manage the organization. Good board practice is a delicate balance of leading and delegating. And then good board practice defines who does what on the board. Again, you're on the board because you're leaders, you've served in the community or in other governmental type roles, and all of you should have a sense of that required delicate balancing. And we just have to keep in mind that that's what we have to do. It's not like it's our own personal business. This is a business that belongs to the public, and that the board has a duty to use good faith to work with each other to reach consensus. Let's see what we have on the next slide here. Okay, I thought this was a good way to put it in the book. Are you wearing the right hat? When you start moving your hats around, that's when you get into trouble, okay? So you all have the Stetson. You're the board member. So you got the tall hat, okay? You set the policy. You decide the important matters, the policy matters. Then the executive director has the task of taking that policy and making sure there's execution of the policy by staff. Danny, is there anything you want to say about that role at this point in terms of the execution? Any thoughts that you think would be helpful to the board in terms of your perspective of dealing with that aspect of it?
Well, I think it's pretty plain that, and all through the book, the board operates as a whole. I mean, that's the only way you can make a decision as a board, total board decision. And just one person out investigating, I think you're outside the scope of your responsibility, if in fact you're doing that. I think that's just, it's bad for the board, it's bad for the organization, and it's bad for the person because they're outside the scope of their duties, and if something happens, then they're on their own. But I think it's clear all through the book that the board operates as a whole, and the executive director's job is to do what the board's job is.
That's right, and if you look on page 12, you know, the executive director takes what the board said is important and breaks it down for staff. And in the first column there, the executive director's only job is to help the board members do the board's job. So by taking what you set as policy and implementing, he's ensuring that the policy that you've set is carried out, carried forward. And they've got, he has some really good comments here, and I like analogies because they kind of help you picture what the relationship should be. And the first one that's checked is, do not look at this as a turf battle between the board and the executive director, because if you do, it's going to be, there's got to be give and take. For everything you give, you got to get, you know, something back if it becomes a turf battle. And that is not, I mean, that is not a functional relationship. And that can become very dysfunctional if everything is thought of in terms of protecting turf. That's why you need to have a good discussion among yourselves. The expectations in setting the policy need to be clearly defined for the executive director. When the meeting's over, he needs to understand, I mean, even though there may have been disagreement, when it comes time to vote, he needs to know what you voted on. And he needs to know that when he carries it out, you know, he's not going to be under fire from, you know, opposing board members because of it. And that will assist the executive director in assisting you. However, you as a board, by setting policy, it doesn't mean you turn everything loose. You have checks and balances. And he gives, the author gives some good examples here. You know, you set the budget. You determine finances available for staff to execute policy. So there are various checks and balances or call them controls or matters that you retain approval power over, and the budget being a very strong and important one. So it is a give and take relationship. It's, and once it starts getting divided into a turf battle, or you cannot communicate with each other or with the executive director, that sets up roadblocks to getting the policy implemented as it should. As the author notes, there are a few activities that you're not somehow involved in, and the staff is great, I think, with the authority of coming to the board meeting with a report in every department where they tell you what's going on in your organization. And then at the end of the meeting, you actually have a round table for issues that maybe if someone thinks something was not answered or resolved from another meeting, you have ample opportunity for discussion and for a productive discussion to be an effective team builder on your board. I find that in the area of conflict, and I deal with lots of conflict, usually if you look at the communication to see how communication has failed. And communication is the best prevention of confusion and conflict. And I strongly agree with that. And we all communicate differently. And I wish I could communicate as poetically or effectively as some people I know. But I tend to get ahead of myself. I tend to, until I get started, get a little nervous. I mean, I don't think I'm the most effective communicator, but I work at it. But I know I get on a track sometimes and I don't hear what somebody else is saying when I'm communicating because I'm so focused on getting what I want to say on the table or to explain my position. And we all have, and I think it'd be good for every board member to think about, what are my communication strong points and what are my communication negatives? And if I kind of get short with somebody else on the board, is it because of I didn't really listen to them because I was so busy with what I had to say, or some other, communication, deficit that I have as opposed to somebody else's? And I think when we sit down to work together, we have to realize we do not all communicate the same. We have different, some of us are more visual than others, and I think we have to be more willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. If you think someone has hurt your feelings, you just let it go. So what? It will not be the last time, probably in life. And just like water off the duck's back. You just move on to something positive. But I think it would be good to kind of think about the way you communicate, your communication style. And I think when you do mediation, which John, as you know, one of the most important things you can do is get people in a room and let them tell each other how they feel about the case. You can't do it at first. It takes a while. But once everybody has their say-so, they've got that out, they've put it on the table, and they know they've been listened to, it's amazing the change that occurs, because once they get it out, you can begin to work with them as a mediator to reach some kind of common agreement. Usually one that not everyone's happy with, but they can end up shaking hands and resolving a dispute because everyone has a say, and then you make sure they've actually heard what the other person said. So those are just some communication thoughts and techniques. You may all have some that you want to throw out there, or things that bother you in communication, or if there's anything that you'd help the board communicate better, I think we ought to just talk about it if anybody has something they want to say on that. Any pet peeves or?
I think my major thing is on page 12, if you look at the paragraph right before the italicized section in the first column, the sweeping delegation of management authority from the board to paid executive and then not interfering with that management except to monitor is one of the most difficult things you'll do on this board. We have to delegate authority to staff to do it, and then we have to back off and let staff do it. And that's one of the hardest things to do.
That is very hard to do, and especially if you've come up with an idea or something and the board, approves a concept or approves a program, sometimes it's hard for you to not go check on it, interfere with it, or I think it should be done this way, or if you have a strong opinion about it, it's hard not to interfere at times.
But you have to
You
back
have
off.
to, and you have to because staff's being paid to do it. That is their job. And if you have an issue about it, what you do?
You go to the board.
That's right.
I think one of the most difficult things 20 years ago that I had when I was on boards and working with people is I was raised, my parents didn't see gray areas. They saw black and they saw white. Either was or either it wasn't. And there was no working that out any other way. You did this and you did that. So being raised that way and also working for myself and you having your employees, you tell them what to do and you expect them to go do it and smile about it. And then you don't have to worry about that anymore. And I think for most people on boards, as you said before, most of us are used to having our own business or managing a business, and we were not questioned.
Right.
And it was always done our way. And I think that was one of the hardest things that I had to come through for the last 20 years in dealing, but when you start dealing with 7 or 10 or 12 other people that feel that same way, then somewhere you have to reach some middle ground on there, and that is very difficult.
That's right, because if you don't reach that middle ground and build a consensus, you're going to have conflict. And I've had the same experience, raised the same way. We just, think, and through my work and everything else, I've learned things aren't as clear as you used to think they were.
Ms. Creek, you're getting better.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
and that others do have other opinions, and I've been surprised at opinions that, I never thought I'd give any credence to actually turned out to be really good things, So innovation's a good thing, and fresh opinions and thoughts, those are all good things, and we do have to come to consensus. We'll move on from page 12, but that little checklist of examples is a good one. Wearing the right hat at the top of page 13. Again, the first hat is the official board member hat. It indicates your authority to act as a governor of the organization. You wear it only when working in official session with the rest of the body. And I think that is a really important concept to keep in mind, or when the full board delegates authority to you to speak for them, to sign documents, and our bylaws speak to signing documents, or to take other action on behalf of the board. And then it also talks about the volunteer hat worn outside of meetings. Again, you might come to the open house, you might come to a recycling day and spend time at the authority. But again, when you come, that is not as a board member to instruct someone to do something or to issue directives to staff.
Well, one question I have, and is it maybe once a year, I'll get a call from somebody who knows me in the public, and they'll say, can you call staff, can you call somebody at Solid Waste Authority and get them to waive this tipping fee or do this favor for, and I know that, I feel like it's a delicate balance between acting, if I could pass on as a board member, if I could pass on a concern of a citizen to staff and then let staff deal with it, that's one thing. But calling staff up and saying, hey, this guy's a friend of mine, do me a favor. I feel like that's overstepping. I'd like to find out from staff if that is offensive or if it puts them in a bad situation. I feel I would, if I could have that information, I would tell the person I can't make that call. How do y'all feel about that?
Experience, and I used to tell new councilmen, don't promise anybody anything, because a lot of times what you're going to promise or you're going to do is illegal and could get you in jail and someone else. I don't think staff does not have a problem with a board member calling and saying, will you call John Doe? He has a question. And we do that all the time. And that's the way we would like for it to be done if you want to be involved any bit. Because a lot of times you tell John Doe, how about call Danny? He thinks you kind of putting him off. But we don't have a problem calling someone with a question. Can we do this? Can I bring this? Where do I take certain items? That's part of our job. But when you get a call and say, John Doe wants to dump so-and-so, and I've told him he can do it, well, then we're way across the line there. And we've got procedures set up for, people that can, nonprofit that's helping build a house or something like that. And you budget money to waive those tipping fees. And Ms. Creech brought it up last meeting, which was great, that if we waive these tipping fees, they should be doing some recycling. And they get more for their money if they do recycle. And that's what we told the group at the beach that was remodeling the theater. They had so many tons or so much money, but if they separated it, they would get more. They could bring us more cheaper. But we have no problem with a board member calling and saying, will you call John Doe? I got a call from him. We don't have a problem with that whatsoever.
What I found works best for me, John, in that situation is I'll pass that information on, I'll give it to the executive director, and that way you cannot be wrong. They can't come back on you. It gets you or me or whoever out of a trap, and it goes by our rules, that we don't go to staff. We either go to the chairman or the executive director, but we don't personally call staff and ask them, can they, can't they, will they, won't they?
Call me.
That's his job. Therefore, we deal with him, and we can't be in trouble if we say, I'll be glad to pass this on to the executive director, someone will be in touch with you.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or ideas on that or concerns?
About the only, usually what I tell them is I'll do you a favor personally, but I will not do you a favor with public money. You just out of luck.
That's easy response to that either. There is a section in here on planning. Again, y'all are about to get into your solid waste management plan revision. I don't know that we really need to go into the planning part of the book unless, Reverend Coakley, there's something you want to say on that?
We can go beyond, no, we don't need to deal with that.
Okay, and it does have, like strategic, steps to keep it going and all that, but I think we ought to, and then there's a section on page 16, I think is good reading about monitoring and proper evaluation of the executive director. It is one that gives the director direction, okay? And information on that, and then being an advocate for the organization. There's a chapter also beginning on page 18 about financial monitoring. Again, I think that's beyond the scope of what we really set this workshop for. You know, based on being in the meetings, you get really detailed information every month concerning finances. You're very involved. You have a professional auditing firm who doesn't just send in a report, but comes and presents the report. You all ask good questions, in-depth questions, and so, again, it's good reading material. It also goes a little bit beyond the scope about donors, like other nonprofits have donors, but again, I think that's really beyond today, so we're going to move on from that. Page 24, the nonprofit paper trail. Again, you've got your paper trail, this book right here that we discovered that was handed out last year has really a very good index with the governing documents for the authority, and you have your articles of incorporation, you have policies, you keep minutes, and so I think we can move on past pages 24 and 25. All right, and let's see what our next slide is. I think we go on to the board policy on page 26. Okay. As we said earlier, this goes into more depth about the board's job is to set policy, the executive director and staff implement policy. Board policies, there's a little checklist there about why policies of the board should be clear, so that the intent of the board is clear, prevents confusion, you have consistency of board action, reduces criticism of board and management, improves public relations, and clarifies roles, and gives the executive a clear direction from the board. Now, we really have two kinds of policies. We have the written handbook type policies on, you know, personnel or finance or how Mike is to issue permits for haulers. But then we have the kind of the operations, issues that come up with operations that come before the board for decision. Is this a route we're going to take or not? Are we going to approve this kind of plan for expansion of the landfill or whatever? But whatever it is that the board adopts, it needs to be clearly stated so that the executive director understands the action taken, and to make sure it's not ambiguous or that it's not stated in a way that you could have two different interpretations of what was voted on. So when a motion is made and the second follows, if anyone feels like it's ambiguous or it's not clearly stated or it could be confusing, you know, you have that period of time for discussion. It can be amended to more clearly state what the directive of the board is in voting on a policy matter. I thought there was some really good information here about, you know, review of your policies. I don't know that you need an annual review because being, you know, carrying out this public body governmental function, a lot of what you do is in your planning documents that have either already been approved or you're about to rewrite the plan. A lot of your construction or capital improvement is already in place and set, but you should also be mindful that if you have policies that are no longer needed, you should move on from there and just make sure they're revised accordingly. Every now and then I do see someone get tripped up in litigation because they've kept an old policy around and didn't dot an I and making a decision where maybe they thought the policy was no longer applicable, but it was still on the books, and that happens more often in, you know, employment issues, matters, or it can happen in procurement also. So if you have the policy and it's in effect, if it's not being followed, the appropriate revision needs to be made. There's a good checklist on page 27. Is this policy really necessary? You don't want a book full of policies that just sound good. You would be amazed how many businesses have these policies that sound wonderful, and they don't follow them, or someone will bring in a book, and they're in litigation, and I'll say, well, did you do this? And oh, we haven't done that in 15 years, you know, or why is this in here? And it was like, well, so-and-so who was here in 1980 really followed this policy, but no one's followed it since. And those are extreme examples, but they do happen. And you need to make sure all the policies are current, consistent with the mission statement, clearly stated, are compatible with the governing documents, and enforceable and affordable. All right.
I have a question.
All right.
Are you saying that, based on this handbook, a proper body should have mission statement, hopefully up to date, not 20 years old, but that would be different from a policy statement.
That's exactly right. The mission statement is more like your goal, your reason to be.
So we have, question would be, it's in this book, do we have a policy statement?
No, sir, that book's about that thick, and it's in Esther's office. Every policy that the board has ever made, from composting to personnel to code of ethics, everything, procurement, is in that book. That's our policy manual.
I understand as it relates to operations of the organization as, for lack of a better term, a trash company, but I'm talking about, do we have a policy statement as it relates to the board?
Code of ethics, yes, sir.
Well, that would come straight from the Ethics Commission. I
No, sir,
presume.
that came from this board. We got rules of conduct that this board has adopted as policy.
Okay. So when we can, when we state,
Conflict- We got one on conflict of interest.
yes, sir, but I can only ask one question at a time. When we say policy as it relates to page 26 and 27, you're telling me that our code of ethics is our board policy statement?
That's part of it. That's just one segment.
And this may help, Mr. Gray, if you look on page 28, I know y'all have just gotten this, they have a checklist of policy categories. It's hard to envision, just kind of abstractly, but if you look at the checklist of policy categories, like use of facilities, or like the policy about reduced tipping fees or waiving tipping fees for charities, that would be a policy. Construction contracts, how the procurement, how to issue a contract, how many bids do you take if it's under a certain amount of money? Disposal of property, and I think y'all do have a policy that when property becomes obsolete, you
Bring it
file.
in front of the board. We got a policy, if you sell property, you go to county council. To buy property, you go to them. That's a policy.
Yeah, but if you listen carefully to his question is not where is the policy that governs the day-to-day operations. He's asking about policies particularly that relates to this board and how this board acts and behaves. Am I correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And I think we do have the kind of more, not as conceptual, but the board rules. And this may be something, we probably need to look at the rules of conduct and see if we need to further define the policy statement of how this board interacts with each other.
I don't need an answer this minute, but, as a board member and we're, through Dr. Coakley's leadership, we're trying to be a good board. So there must be a something which says this is the policy of the board. And maybe it needs to be compiled from several different places, and if so, and maybe it goes by different names, like rules of conduct or code of ethics. I can get that later. I don't have to have it this minute, but if there's another name for it, or where is it, or when was it done?
Rules of conduct.
Right, there's a section on decorum. The chairman or presiding officer is charged.
Yeah, but I want to get what we have. What we have is called rules of decorum, or what is it called?
This is called rules of conduct, and it's the 4th tab in that notebook.
One he's reading from?
That's right, and it's a notebook that,
The one that we sent out last July.
right,
Rules of conduct?
Yes, sir.
tab 4.
Is that the one that was adopted in October of, let's see, I came on in November of 11, I believe there was a,
This was,
Type.
this says October 25th,
2011.
2011.
Yep.
yeah.
And was
yeah.
it not revised from an old set, Danny, is that, Mr. Jones, is that correct? We had an old
think
set
it
before
was.
this one.
Yeah, I think,
and
Yeah,
when-
the,
just like
Yes.
county council
December
does.
16th, 99.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I recall that when I first got here, my first meeting, they said, here's the rules of conduct. We just got through adopting, and not these words exactly, but
And here's another.
I came in November and they said, well, just before you got here, we put in some rules of conduct.
And there'd been a prior.
Sure, it's
study.
all coincidental.
Well, here's one from 2004 now,
Really
okay?
did it, really did it in 1999.
I started to say that was simply a revision. We did that many years before that. And as upthing, as we do in here, we look at ways to better the board and better ourselves. It was not meant for any individual. It was meant for the good of the board.
As I say, I'm sure it was just coincidental and it was just a normal process and rules of conduct it just happened to be revised in October of 2011. And I was able to read them at my first meeting.
And if you look at tab 6 of that notebook, this says Horry County Solid Waste Authority, Inc. Statement of Policy, okay? And that's the
it.
title of it, Statement of Policy. Well,
That's-
this affirms the principles of the Freedom of Information Act, and then also states the board's policy about confidentiality of matters properly discussed in executive session has been essential to orderly conduct of the business.
I think you've answered my question. What I was just trying to get at, okay, well, we got this mission statement and we got this handbook as a guide, and there's several other reports. Is there a thing for what we call rules of conduct, generally speaking, is the policy statement for the board, as I understand it?
That is.
I just need to make sure I'm conversant.
Possibly to help answer your question, Mr. Gray, is that one of the reasons for going through this is to try and help us see what we need to do for the board. And we already see that we need to actually just develop a policy manual for the board itself, as well as have the manual for day-to-day operation.
Maybe organize it by, just like policy categories.
Right.
There can be categories in the manual.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody doing okay? Do we need a break, or you want to keep going?
I'd like to take a break.
A short break, and then we're going to talk about the executive director.
I'm the only one
Oh,
in
yeah.
here who's ever had bladder cancer. I can tell you, I
Well, let's
like
take a
breaks.
break.
Yeah,
All
we-
right.
Also, how about somebody hit the heat button in here? All right.
I am too.
That's right. Being a good board member, team player. I mean, the board is a team. It's a team sport here, people.
As we start in this section, one of the first things we need to remember always is that the executive director is actually considered a member of the board. He just does not have any voting rights, but he is considered a member of the board without voting rights, and he is given he's delegated to handle the day-to-day operations of the organization. And once we delegate that to him, then we're supposed to step back and monitor him, but we're not to interfere with his work during the course of his working, which also eliminates us from being involved in the day-to-day operations. As board members, it is not our place to become involved in day-to-day operations. And that's where the line is, which becomes difficult for us to deal with. I perhaps know about the difficulties of that, even from a pastoral perspective. Once you select someone to do a job, you delegate it to them. You have to step back and allow them to do it. Because if you're going to insist that they do every single thing according to your way, you might as well do it yourself. And so it becomes important to allow them the right to exercise their gifts and abilities in that process. He's a vital part of the team. Without the executive director as a part of the team, then we are basically a team without a quarterback. And it becomes difficult for us to move forward because of his familiarity with the day-to-day operations. He sees the issues that they come across on a daily basis, and he brings those to us as a board for us to deal with as it relates in terms of policies in that process. The executive director does not have 7 bosses. He has 1 boss, and that is the full board. No board member has the authority to instruct the executive director to do anything without the consensus of the entire board. And that becomes a vital and important factor, because there are times in which we want to see things done a certain way, but until the board decides how it's to be done, it's not an order for the executive director. And it becomes a lot easier for him to fulfill his responsibilities, knowing that he has the full board backing him and working with him, rather than having to dance to the tune of 7 different musicians. And so it becomes important for us to realize that in the midst of it. And when you read these sections in the book, and believe me, they're eye-openers about the do's and the don'ts, and it's important for us to be aware of that, because we find ourselves facing some don'ts that we've been doing and some do's that we have not been doing. So we're going to need to move forward, make some adjustments in the midst of that. That does not say that we rubber stamp every single thing that he does. We're not going to be a rubber stamp board. And so it's important for us to be aware of that. It is not our responsibility to say yes to everything he brings. We need to evaluate it, check it out, and then if it's in the best interest of the citizens of Horry County, then we move forward with it in that respect. So we have to be mindful of that, but delegation is a hard thing to do, and sit back and wait on the results.
Does anybody here have a problem micromanaging sometimes?
A bad one.
And it's hard to resist the urge. I'm like, see a big box of supplies go by the door of my office, and I'm wondering, well, what are they buying now? And I realize my legal brief goes down, and I go down to the room just to see, and I'm thinking, this is not my business. We have somebody who does the ordering, they get the best price, but it's just kind of funny, because sometimes you see something or hear something, and there's just that little urge to get involved because you want to see what's going on, or perhaps you think you know a better way to do it because you do that kind of item in your business, or you're just curious, or maybe like I was, bored, really wanted something else to do than read the brief. But micromanaging is, by board members, is very detrimental to an organization. And it makes it difficult for the executive director to do his job. If the director has to go out and please, micromanaging instincts of every board member, he's not going to have much time left to do his job back here at the authority. We're not saying, if you see something that doesn't look right, yes, you should, bring it to the board, inquire about it. You have a great time to, do that at the board meeting. You run your board meetings well, but when there's the need for an issue to be brought up, time is made for that. You ask good questions. This is a board that does inquire about things. Well, the board meeting is the place, to do that, or bring it to the attention of the chair if there's something immediate, so that he can go to the executive director and bring it up. I think it'd be good to hear from Danny, if you are inclined to do so, Danny, how, you perceive the day in, day out activities, and if there's a lot of dabbling by others, you can give some generic examples of how that might impact what you're doing or affect it that, others may not think about. Because I think sometimes when you inquire, if I want to see what's in the box, it's because I want to make sure funds are being spent correctly and we're not buying, supplies we don't use. But the person doing the ordering may not take it that way. It's like she's just being a busybody over here. So different people have different reasons for doing that. but let's just hear from you how you feel and how it affects you.
I think dabbling is putting it mildly. My
Goodness.
And it is somewhat disruptive when we have a board member to ask staff certain information, and they tell the staff members, well, don't tell Danny. Well, they gonna come right straight and tell me. Time and time again, and it's just counterproductive when that happens. If we get a request, we're gonna look into it. We're gonna be as truthful, fair. Do we make mistakes? Sometimes, but we quick to own up to it and tell you so. And I think this board's a long way from a rubber stamp. I mean, the last board meeting when we brought up the issue on farming the A2 site, 1187, y'all questioned it, sent it back to bring back more information on it for the next meeting. We try to stay in front of those type things to try to get most of the answers to you right up front. Sometimes we don't know what all the questions will be. We take pride in figuring out what a lot of the questions may be. But all managers have their own management style, and mine's kind of laid back, work things out together, but it's hard when people are working in different directions. It's not as hard here as it was downtown because single-member districts makes it harder down there. Here, it pretty much tells us that no matter what your interests were or how you got here, your interest now is being a member of the board. And that's how we get things done, by full board approval, majority board approval. And the next point is chain of command. And I guess that's the thing that irritates me worse than anything else. Haven't had any trouble here, but some employees kind of going to a board member or council member trying to get something either in the budget or get a problem worked out. And that, I guess that irritates me more so with a staff member than it does a board member or a council person. But not using the chain of command as we've got set up here, and it's pretty clear. That can wreck an organization about as quick as anything in the world, because then you've got a ruckus between the executive and the staff, and then you've got kind of a split between the staff and the board, or certain members of the board. So we have set some broad goals years ago, and I think they're very broad in the mission statement, and I think we're hammering on those every year. And your short-term goals is pretty much what you approved in the budget. And we take those directions, and we work the short-term goals. But if you want things to go in a different direction, just give me those directions. We will, it's always been, if you want to do something either here or downtown, we'll explain to you why we are taking a different look at it. But if the board votes in a certain way, then by gosh, we will do everything we can do to accomplish that direction. But And all in all, I think we work well, together. But sometimes, innuendos and emails get me riled up a little bit, and we just got to be, I think, very careful about what we put out. And we got to be careful that that's not interpreted to be full board decisions or philosophies. And then when we go back to the board members' directions that we've read in here, it's, your responsibility is to the board, to each other, as a whole. And then it's my job to make that work. As long as we keep the lines of communication open and stay between the ditches, I think we'll continue to meet those goals. We got a big year ahead of us, and we certainly can't get it done pulling and tussling.
Is there anything that y'all as board members want to say about, the reporting procedure or issues you see, or your perspective when you have concerns?
I think, I think that's one of the best procedures, because being at the Zoning Board of Appeals, I really feel for staff, because as I used to say, the staff there had 12 bosses in county council, and then they had 9 of us on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and you can't please that many people. Then they had the public come in both sides, and you can't do that. So the staff, in my opinion, has the worst job. They have to think about keeping their job, and they can't please everybody. And if you can have one person that goes to staff, I think that's the best way to do it.
And I think our staff now has got to the point that they would rather issues come to me. They don't want to get caught in the middle of issues and between this ruckus or this one. So I think right now, either it come to Reverend Coakley and he can get it to me, or straight to me, and then we will get the information that the board wants.
I don't look at that procedure as being a filter. I think all the issues that come up are addressed through that system. I think a lot of some people's concern is that I don't want to have to go through Reverend Coakley, and then Reverend Coakley take my words and give it to Danny, and then Danny take my words and give it to staff. But with the concern that it'll somehow get adulterated between A, B, C, and D. But I haven't, everything that goes from Reverend Coakley to you gets sent to the staff member, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because you will ask me later, what did we find out? And I don't want to get caught there of not being responsive. Because somebody'd ask you, somebody's got a problem. Somebody has an issue, somebody's got a question, somebody wants to know something, and that's what we're here for. To work for the constituents or the haulers, and I think we've come a long way with that. Having haulers meeting and having these type meetings and open house and invite the public out and all those type things. So I think we're open to the public and we're concerned about them. And with the service we give and the incentives we give and the price that we offer compared to other areas, best deal in the southeast, I think.
Does everyone feel like you're getting the information you need? Are there any concerns with this procedure? I mean, those of you who have used it, do you feel like it's working? Did you get the feedback that you need by going through?
If you don't have this procedure, you're gonna have chaos, because you have no organization. I mean, it cannot work any other way without it being disruptive. It's not is there a better plan than this? I personally do not believe, if you look at, military, or if you look at the fire service, or you look at any governmental organization, without this, if you don't have that in place, then you're gonna have chaos. You're gonna start people picking teams and intimidating and bothering, and I like this one, don't like that one. It has to work this way for it to succeed. It has to be this way for it to succeed.
I think the
Can I make a comment? I just think that the board meetings are the time to express concerns, where the full board hears everything and the opportunity is given for people to respond to it, rather than, you know, I don't think I'm doing my job if I have a concern and I wait after the board meeting and then go somewhere else and not include this body to try to express the concern, whether it's a financial concern or a policy concern or something that I'm questioning about the way that things are happening. I think I owe it to the rest of this board to hear what my concerns are, and then the answer may not be readily available right then, but everybody hears the concern and question, and then the response is going to be brought back, but to the full board.
I agree. In an open forum where you have an opportunity to discuss, not in email. I don't like bringing up issues in the email and bouncing it back and forth in the email. I like open discussion. If it's a board issue, talk about it at the board meeting in an open public forum where people can address it at that time.
Yeah, I agree. I think everything should be discussed in the board meeting so that everybody has everyone else's perception, and it needs to be done there. Not only just for us, but for the public. The people now that are watching what we do, comment years ago when Liz Gillen was on chairman, one of the things she did that I liked, I always went to INR and admin, so I knew what 1, 2, 3, 4 and which ordinance. It had been discussed in the INR meeting and the admin meeting. But when it came to council, it was just one comment. So when other people were looking at that, if they didn't go to the meetings, they didn't understand the discussion or the meat of what was being discussed. And generally, she would read out and explain each one of those. And you would be surprised how much the public appreciated that, because then they could comment to their council person and to everyone else they knew. So I think everything that we do should be discussed and explained in our meetings. And even on the zoning board of appeals, when I would read my package and I would go to the areas that we were looking at, I guess you form an opinion on how you might vote or the questions you wanted asked. And there were several things that I really thought I would vote no on until the other board members discussed it and until both sides of that disagreement came before us to give us more testimony. So really, to get all of your opinions and your perceptions and your experience, to me, is a big help to me. And I would prefer to hear it and discussed, and I think it should all be discussed openly. I have asked Danny for some information. I've always gotten it in a timely manner. I guess one thing that I may have done just because of convenience, I tend to be at council meetings used to and would see Mike and I would ask him something that maybe I should have directed at Danny before I did him, so I'll take care of that.
I'd like to, if it's not discussed at the board meeting, such as emails and such as that, I would like to think, or I would like to see us discuss it at the round table at the end of the meeting. I think the round table is the place to discuss these things. And if it has been put forth by one of the board members and we did not discuss it at the board meeting, let's bring it out at the round table and see what we got and what the answers are. Because I would like, if somebody, one of the board members asking a question, I might be interested in what's going on and what the answer is also. So as I said, we can discuss at the round table, bring it up at the round table and discuss it.
Especially now, I think with county council's desire or directive for us to have publicized, videoed meetings, everything needs to be on the table, an open discussion. Emails are a good way to hide the discussions that the sender might not want the public to know about. So I got nothing to hide. I want the public to know about it.
Those are all good comments. And I do think, Pam, what you said about the discussion, you get everyone's thoughts. Sometimes it changes your mind about an issue, or it makes you think about it in a different way. And that's really what a good team does. That's how you build that consensus. And you've got a good team. You've got, board members from different areas and different backgrounds, different expertise. And that's the way it is designed to work and should work. As the summary points out, the board executive director relationship is not your normal employer-employee relationship. The executive director is a member of the team. And, again, while the board monitors the executive director, it is not to interfere with daily management activities, but the executive has a special role vis-a-vis the board as advisor, consultant, partner. I mean, the executive buys into what the board is doing because the executive is expected to make it work, to make the policies you set work.
And staff, we don't have a problem with questions. We may not be able to give you the answer then, but we're going to give you most of the answers then because the staff knows they're part of the business and willing to stand up and give those answers. And one thing I've started doing, if a point's made in the board meeting that needs clarification, then I'm going to call on staff to clarify that issue to make sure you understand exactly what the whole story is. Because we want it clarified. And I'm getting pretty good feedback from people that's watching the tapes, and they appreciate us doing that. And I think we've opened some eyes on how we do business, and that we do it well.
And one thing, I've noticed too, Danny, is that if staff or you, if someone doesn't know the specific answer at the time or have the information, they immediately say, I don't know, but I will get it for you, or I don't have that information, but I will get it for you, which I think instills a lot of trust in what is said and in the relationship that, that you're willing to say, I don't know the answer to that. I want you to have the correct information instead of trying to remember something you're not sure about. All right, there are no other comments.
I just got one on page
All right.
33.
Yes.
The executive has one boss to full board. I think it's important for us to read that. The executive is responsible to the whole board, but not responsible to each board member. He's only responsible to us when we speak with one voice.
And that's a very good point. It goes back to the setting of policy and execution. All right, let's see what our next slide is. All right, relation to staff. All right, that begins on page 33. This kind of like reaffirms or emphasizes what we've talked about in terms of the relationships, and talks about the problems when there is a failure to follow the chain of command in terms of board's relation to staff. And And they give an example for the nonprofit of the different kinds of staff you may have, and you have a good bit of staff here because of the different activities of the authority. Again, the board itself has one employee, and that is the executive director. And employees need to have a clear understanding of, who they report to, who they take direction from. And while a board member may not intend to create confusion about that, just by stepping into the chain of command relationship, that happens. It damages the chain of command. The employee begins to wonder, okay, what do I do? I've been asked to do this. I need to go tell my boss. Is the board member going to get mad at me because I told the executive director? You could even get into a situation where maybe the employee begins to feel more loyalty toward a particular board member than they do their supervisor or the executive director. Maybe the employee feels that they're being favored, or they may feel disfavored by being asked to, do things. And it just, when you look at the dynamics in terms of reporting procedures, it's an unfair position to put employees in because that is not their reporting chain of command. As the author says it on page 33, you hire an executive who is to be the expert in managing the organization, and that includes managing personnel. And the responsibility for managing personnel is delegated. Again, he talks about the chain of command, the rules of the chain of command. Again, staff has a clear reporting procedure. If a staff has a complaint, they have a reporting procedure for those complaints. There are legal reasons for those reporting procedures to be in effect and followed, as well as the practical rules of good management of any organization. And we've talked about the breakdown in chain of command, creating problems. And I don't know, is there anything else that anyone wants to say about that, about breakdown in chain of command?
Board officers, who's in charge?
All right, let's talk about our board officers and who's in charge. Your officers are clearly delineated in your bylaws. We have the board chair. The board chair runs the meetings, has the title of chair. And then if you look in the bylaws, contained in Article 8, you have the bylaw provisions relating to each office. The chair serves as the chairman of the board, calls the meetings and briefings of the board, presides, maintains decorum at the meetings, and enforces the rules of the board. The chair consults with the executive director in establishing the agenda, makes committee assignments subject to board approval, signs documents as authorized by the board, and performs such other duties as authorized by the board that are in accordance with the governing documents. So your hierarchy here with the chair really fits into what we've been discussing this afternoon in terms of chain of command and duties. We also have the duties of the other officers set forth in the bylaws, so that each officer knows what they're responsible for based on the governing document. Are there any questions about, you know, the duties and authority of the board officers? I think this has been in operation for quite some time and pretty well established. So we really, I don't have a whole lot to say on this unless there are concerns or questions in terms of how operations have been going under the bylaw definitions of officers.
Any comments, questions?
All right, our next section relates to the committees of the board. And again, as our author points out, a committee in and of itself has no power or authority. The committee holds the committee meeting and comes back with a recommendation or no recommendation to make to the board on a matter assigned to that particular committee. The committee is accountable to the full board. And then it is the board that takes up the matter and makes a decision as to whether to approve or disapprove the recommendation of the committee. Are there any concerns or questions about committees and how they work, or any concerns with whether your committee structure is working properly?
I think the question came up about advertising committees and the difference between a standing committee and ad hoc committee. Are there specifics to our organization versus general statutes, or?
You know, the Freedom of Information Act does not make a distinction of that nature. The safe thing to do, it really is an area, you know, that could probably be more clearly defined. This comes more from some of the AG opinions and some language in court cases. It's not as definitive as you would like, or everyone would like. The safe thing to do is just advertise it and have it posted and follow FOIA. If the committee is in a position, technically you have the argument that the committee is not taking action, it's only making recommendations, but you do actually vote to approve the recommendation to go. If someone were to establish that all committee recommendations are rubber stamped by the board, which I think you could show they're discussed and all that, but if an argument was made and somebody went back 5 years and everything the committee recommended got approved, the court might look at that and say the real decision-making is happening with the committee. So the court decisions recently have become extremely liberal. One just got overruled on the agenda because it went, was very liberal in interpreting the statute. And the preamble says, it is to be liberally enforced in favor of disclosure. With a intent like that stated in the act, a court is going to come down on side of disclosure if there is any ambiguity or issue.
What act is that, please?
The South Carolina Freedom of Information Act.
If you look in our board, the manual that you have, and under tab 4, section 2.41,
Yes.
it says the chairman may call a brief meeting, workshop, or committee meeting during any regular board meeting or any time upon 2 business days prior notice. Only those items mentioned in the notice or on the accompanying agenda shall be discussed at the briefing, workshop, or committee meeting. It says anytime the board meets, I can announce a committee meeting, at that time, and don't have to give 2 days public notice.
And we need to look at that in light of some of these recent, there's been no ruling specifically on that issue, but I think we need to look at that in light of some of these recent decisions.
That's a part of what we'll look at with the revisions of the bylaws.
Because you don't want to be a test case.
Right. No, I don't want to be a test case.
Is that, I noticed you got the red red line document, is that the same document we had ready to go, I mean, that you had prepared in July of last year?
Yes.
That's the one we're working on, yes.
Yes, sir. So it should be in your book. And,
And that's the one we'll take up again on the 31st.
all right.
Yeah, I've withheld any comment on discussion of bylaws when it's obvious that we need to revise our bylaws, and our bylaws are in conflict with some of the elements in this workshop booklet, but I know that you would be led to say, Mr. Gray, we won't have discussion on bylaws today, we'll do that on the 31st.
No, we're gonna do all that on 31st. I was just pointing out an answer to the
Now,
question.
that was a good thing to point out
Thank
too,
you.
because I'd looked at that and had actually forgotten about it. Reverend Hopefully, I'll make a note about that one in the bylaws. So Lance, I did not give you a black and white answer, like clear cut.
That's right,
Right.
because I would be interested in knowing, and perhaps it'll be addressed on the 31st.
It will be.
Half
Not
of our
perhaps.
committees are ad hoc, or made up, whatever ad hoc means, and half of them are standing, and do the rules for ad hoc apply the same as for the standing, or do they just have whatever rules they want to make up? I mean, that was generally what you were talking about, and there's been no clear answer that I heard. But you say we'll take that up on the 31st.
Kind of what I got from it is to fall on the safe side and advertise.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I.
Well, and Jim will follow the rules.
I think in talking with Esther, is that by state law, committees don't have but to be safe, do it.
And there's been a little bit of erosion of that.
Yeah.
Some of the language that's not the decisive language, but there has been, like I said, these cases are trending toward inclusion.
And even the agenda issue now has been kind of reversed
That was reversed.
a little bit, so
Yes.
you'd really don't know what we're talking about. At one time, you could change your agenda in the meeting, and then we got lower court says you can't do that.
You can't change your agenda.
You couldn't change it. Now they've reversed it back and says that you can.
That went all the way up.
So,
Was reversed, and said that if you have a lawfully called meeting, that you've given the public notice of the meeting, and you've posted that you don't have to post the agenda, let me get this correct. You post the agenda, there are sometimes, I believe you have an option on that in certain situations. So they read the language to say, if you post it, this doesn't mean you can't change it. But we can do like a little briefing that outlines what those
When
requirements are.
does the change have to be announced and start
You
all
would have to
over?
amend the agenda. Now, before that, you just couldn't change it. You'd have to
Yeah.
advertise a new meeting for that item. But now, when they reversed it, you may entertain a motion to
To change.
amend the agenda. It states the item, and you can amend it in that meeting, because notice of the meeting itself has been given, so the public knows there is a meeting.
So one,
An amendment.
a cynical person could say, well, you could just say, we're gonna have a meeting, and you can publish or not publish an agenda, and you can establish or change whatever whenever you get there.
And I think that was the argument that led to that first part of the decision, yes.
Okay.
Did county council changes theirs every time they meet? Is that,
Now.
I mean, I'm not trying to be critical, I'm just
No.
saying, does that mean
Well,
they
that-
shouldn't be
that's
doing
the,
that?
The Association of Counties, I believe, was one of the groups that intervened or put in a brief as amici in that case, saying this is unworkable,
Okay,
okay? Now, special or called meetings, you're calling it for a special purpose, so you do have to state the purpose on your special
Okay.
call, short notice.
okay.
But,
Well, it doesn't really matter which thing
now,
that
you may
came up
amend your
at.
agenda now at your regular meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that it is legal to do that now?
It is legal to do that.
Is there a percentage that you can, or 25%? You can't do the whole thing. I'm
No
sure there are
percentage.
criteria,
You can amend,
anything.
yes.
It don't matter, you going to every meeting anyway.
That's
so-
true. That's true.
Reverend Copeland, let me be sure I understand, on the committee meeting though, that can be announced at the board meeting, it doesn't have to.
That's what our bylaw says. She's getting ready to, she's gonna confirm that with FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act now. You know, that's one reason we're going through all this. We'll make certain that that our bylaws will be in accordance with FOIA so that there are no discrepancies and no problems with that. But the way our bylaws read now is that we have the right to call a committee meeting in a regular business meeting, you know, without giving 2 days' notice.
Right.
I
And
think
you,
we're-
and
She's gonna verify that we can still do that.
I think we're going to need to require that, because really, when you give 2 days, it turns into a called or special meeting.
Right.
Because of the amount of time. So we're going to need to change that. You know, you could call one a week later in the meeting, but you know, that would give you time to post it and put the agenda up, and that would be okay. But I don't believe you're going to be able to call a special.
Not a special meeting, I mean, but a committee meeting, you know.
you're
it's a
talking about
committee-
committee meeting now, so
that's the critical, I guess that's the real wording, whether you're calling a special meeting of the board or you're calling a committee meeting. That's what we need to find out.
Public notice, the safe thing to do is give public notice of all committee meetings.
Yeah, that's the
Unless
safe,
you have an emergency.
And you couldn't do that within 2 days, could you?
you know, in
With
terms of.
advertising it?
That's on that, in terms of whether or not that's possible to do that, yeah.
Now, if it were an emergency,
Right.
different.
Yeah, it'd be different, okay.
Yeah.
We'll address that. Anything else on committees? I think we have another slide.
Oh,
Okay.
these are present committees.
Right, here are the present committees.
Some of them are ad hoc or standing and. or
The only one would be considered ad hoc would basically be nominations.
Well, I mean, like diversion is in one.
By the definition of by the definition of what parliamentary procedure call ad hoc. You know, the others are constant, ongoing committees. And that's what standing committees means. Standing committees are committees that are constant, ongoing meeting committees. Ad hoc committees are committees, those that simply come for a special purpose at simply once or twice during the course of the annual year.
Well, we may differ about the Latin meaning of ad hoc, but.
Well, I'm
but-
just, that's what parliamentary procedures call it. That's,
but
that's what I'm going by.
Please, but what I'm saying is, I have a list, I didn't bring it with me, because I asked, well, could I have a list of our committees? And it's about half the number that's on there. So we have some committees that are on a list and some committees that are not on the list. I don't know how we define them, but if the purpose of this meeting about this guidebook is to get opinions, in my opinion, I don't care what we call a committee, I think we should treat them all the same. They should be appointed and approved by the board, there should be appropriate notice, and there should be an agenda, and I think we should, instead of operating on what we can do because we can get away with it, we should operate on the basis of what you say is the safe thing to do, to avoid being taken to court. That's my view.
All right, so I'm going to note here the committee issues that we have, and we can take those up, do the bylaws. All right, our next may be on managing risk, which we talked about a little bit. We mentioned the legal liability issues, standard duty of care. The booklet on page 42 gives you a good checklist of what your duty of care would involve as a board member. That would include attending the meetings of the board, being prepared, knowing what's going on and participating, asking questions, reviewing financial information, audits, you know, making sure the policies are correct, understanding the legal requirements. There is also a good discussion of duty of loyalty, and those duties include avoiding conflicts of interest or of disclosure conflicts. I think everyone's familiar with the disclosure requirements under the Ethics Act. Avoiding trading with or doing business with the organization. Now there, with the nonprofit, they've got, except when the business is clearly in the best interest of the organization, you would have State Ethics Act provisions that would apply there, but that would be more, that would be stricter. Refraining from using the board position as one used for personal gain, and maintaining confidential information. The steps for risk management, some are common sense. Make sure you have time to really serve, get up to speed fast, pay attention, know the policies and follow them, use common sense in taking action as a board member. There are certain things you don't have to be told. Seeking legal advice if there is a legal question. And then we do have, under the indemnification, we do have a corporate indemnification, and then check the board's directors and officers' liability insurance policy. With both indemnification, again, you have a business judgment rule. You act within the scope of the business. You don't go out on a park. Same with the insurance. You know, you've got to maintain your proper scope of action to maintain your right to be indemnified or your insurance. And we've sort of gone over that. The insurance is through the South Carolina Insurance Reserve Fund, same insurance that the county has. Is that correct, Danny? It's pretty much the same. So it's insured with the state treasury. Code of ethics, again, that's written for us in terms of the state code. And we have the ethics policy. I believe you have ethics training every so often. I don't know when, I did one a long time ago. I don't know if y'all have been doing some in-house or not. But I've seen the forms go out. And I know those go out every year for everybody to fill out, and they get filed. There is a managing risk checklist on page 45, and this is a good checklist for, you know, just to kind of go through to see where, you know, where you feel like you fit in terms of managing risk. It includes familiarity with the policies, meeting attendance, and of course not everyone can attend every meeting, but we're talking about excessive non-attendance there. Y'all keep very good meeting minutes. You had the insurance again. I think y'all are in good standing under these. It does have as one of the checklist items allowing management to manage, and then seeking expertise on issues that you do not understand. Any questions on the managing risk section? There's also a code of ethics on the following page.
I guess it would be to do with recusing yourself. When I was on the zoning board of appeals, a man went to John Weaver and told him he had to make me recuse myself because I didn't like him. And
And
Clearly.
we're allowed to determine whether there was a conflict or not.
well, as Mr. Weaver told him, that the only reason that we would recuse ourselves would be if we were going to make or lose money. So that seemed to be a problem for him, since I wasn't going to make or lose money. And I asked John if there was any reason I should recuse myself, and he said no. So of course I did not. But I do know that if you or a member of your family or someone that's involved in that, or you're involved in a business that would have to do with, in any way, as I understand it, to do with that, that you would recuse yourself from voting
There is
on
a
whatever issue.
very well-defined section on that, on what is an interest that would mandate disclosure with business or with family members. It defines family members. It's very detailed, and it's your responsibility and duty to follow that statute.
Right.
That is well spelled out. On other issues, like someone says you're biased or unfair, you know, if you felt like you were, then definitely you could just recuse yourself.
Right.
Or if you had some, but if you know, again, they can't make you step down just by saying that.
Right.
That's right.
So does the duty to point out a potential conflict of interest lie with the individual,
With the board member.
with the board member?
You have a duty to point it out. It has to be noted in the minutes. And what I, you know, and I don't remember exactly this requirement. I've always done it with a letter. Because I have had situations where I've had to step aside. It's been a long time, but I've put it in a letter. I'd make the announcement in the meeting and hand the letter to the secretary or recording person.
So you cannot point to another board member and say, I believe you have a conflict of interest?
You can raise the issue, but you can't make the decision for them. The ethics commission will decide whether they did the right
Okay.
thing or not if it's reported as a violation.
Okay.
But I think it'd be our duty if we thought there was one,
To point it
to
out.
raise the issue.
Yes. Yes, it's very proper to raise the issue. If you felt like someone on the board was about to step into an ethics mine, you know, that maybe they forgot, they didn't realize it, they didn't know the definition of family, and you knew it applied, the proper thing would be to say to them, we feel that you should consider under the Ethics Act the statement that says, you know, someone with a family interest in a business should not vote on matters relating to a contract with that business. And family is defined as. And then if they refuse, then it becomes a matter. And there are some mandatory reporting requirements too, that my recollection is that if the board is aware of an ethics issue, there is a duty to report that board member. We have had that in the past. So. All right, anything else on that? All right, the next board meetings, where the action is, and I think there may be a slide on that one. Maybe another. Okay, this hopefully will kind of be a positive beginning to kind of wrap up where we've been. Now that everyone kind of understands the rules of protocol or has had a refresher on rules of protocol, every board member is responsible for good meetings. And the good meeting doesn't start when the chair calls the meeting to order. The good meeting starts before you get here. You review your board packet, you know your information, and you show up on time, and the meeting gets started, and you begin to conduct the business of the authority.
Emma Ruth, I'm still a little fuzzy on what constitutes a meeting. I think we had that question come up about the quorum, and you know, I think there's situations that all of us probably need to be aware of, but I just would like a clarification, and there may be a difference between what we're talking about today and our bylaws, and if that's it, you know, we'll talk about it on the 31st, but
I think we do need to clarify the bylaws. What makes some of it unclear is there is a provision in the Freedom of Information Act that you cannot try to thwart the intent of the act. For example, if you were to break yourself down into little groups of 3, you'd have 3 over here, and then one of those people went and had 3 over there, and one person from that group went and met with two other people, and in effect, you circulated an agenda for action to be taken. You've really kind of created a sub-quorum that
Right.
would create a quorum.
Right, and I know there's unanimous consent, but, I mean, in almost a ridiculous example, is if two of us are eating lunch and two others come in, and they say, well, we can't be in the same restaurant, or we can't sit with you, or...
If you did not, that was an accident, that's no problem. Okay? That is by chance, that's right, Danny. That is not a problem. You don't have to run out the door when two other people come in, okay? That is,
But we also couldn't, the four of us sit at the table and say, oh, while we're here, let's go ahead and
Let's conduct some
decide.
business.
Right.
or somebody couldn't say, well, so-and-so and I are meeting at noon down by the restaurant at Town Hall. Might be a good day to think about some business. You know, it's kind of a code for get the word out. Let's all show up there.
That's
I mean,
not a
these
by
things
chance.
happen. Yes, that's not by chance. That is premeditated. So
Well,
that,
Obviously, part of my question is what came up at the last meeting is there was a trip to go check out the compost and all, and again, I wouldn't have thought that would have been a violation, but I was incorrect based on the,
that is,
Okay.
you know, one of those really, it's hard to plan the meeting and have a quorum go and have the paper or somebody else say they took a quorum on the trip. If you're going to have a trip, why not just, you know, if everybody really wants to go, then you look at just putting up an announcement that says, you know, board members, notice is given that although no formal meeting will be held, board members are traveling to, you know, Mount Pleasant to look at a facility. You know, any member of the public who wants to travel on their own, you know, this is it. That may be where we are now. Again, it's one of those issues, but you have set a meeting where you have the possibility of a quorum showing up, so say things advertising, say we're going on a trip.
but then things like the SWA conference at Pawleys Island, if four of us had shown up, we wouldn't have been in violation because it was a conference.
I think what we need to do, first, we gotta agree, I think amongst ourselves and with the law, what
That's right.
quorum is, by chance, or is it a planned meeting that we've set up for transportation, going on our business? I think if, like Swan, if we know there's 5 people wants to go, I think we will advertise it, we will discuss it well in the public eye, that we will be at Ollie's, at a SWANA convention, and make it known that's what we're doing. By chance, you know, we all ended up at Gallivant's Fair at the stump meeting, that's by chance.
That's by chance.
But if we got a van gonna load up, we've noticed, to the board that we're going down there, then I think we got to be kind of careful.
How about if it's a committee assignment? In other words, it's a committee that's going to look at a project,
Well, and I think then what you got,
rather
Ruth
than,
said,
I mean,
you
not,
got to put it in the
You may
paper and
look at
advertise
that.
it.
You may have to advertise that.
say that again now, please.
We may need to advertise that with some of the opinions that are being given. And again, that's an area that's changed. But we'll bring you some guidance on that.
Well, I would think that a deciding factor, maybe the deciding factor, and what was the intent of the parties, whether it was 2 people or 12 people? If they intended to discuss business related to what we do here, and did in fact discuss that business, and did in fact make decisions, and did move in that direction, then clearly that was a quorum. But on the other hand, if it's a field trip, like some that we've taken, whether it be a field trip to the General Assembly or a field trip to a closed power plant or a field trip to a place that's composting, and you're just there to observe and learn and try to be as good a member as you can. I don't think that necessarily by itself constitutes an illegal meeting with an improper quorum. And I think that should be taken into account as well.
It will be, and I think that by itself shouldn't be deemed an illegal meeting.
Right.
The problem is, let's say on the way back, everybody decided in the van that it's a great idea to purchase a piece of equipment you just went to see, and you're asked about it. Well, it's out of, it's.
Well, then you just say, we can't talk about that. We have to,
You can do that, but, and what if
Don't
in
do it.
SWA, everybody goes out to stand under the oak tree and decides an issue.
Same
these are
thing.
tough
Don't do
questions.
it.
It used to be a lot clearer, and now it's become more difficult.
Well, I think we've been very conscious of this, and we have not, the best I can remember, had a quorum, either at Long Beach or San Diego or at Waldoboro or at Paulus. I think we've been very conscious of.
well, a quorum, you're saying no more than 3. People interested in going and learning might be 4 or 5. And our attorney is saying that by itself is not necessarily an illegal act. It depends on what the purpose of or at least in part, it depends on what the purpose was. It was the purpose to discuss business and were decisions made and so forth and so on.
But it can be difficult to defend.
Well, apparently it's difficult to make it work here. And I think then you're gonna have to look, if you got a committee set up, you got 3 people on it, and 5 wants to go, then it's gonna be up to the chairman to say the committee can go and make the call. Or if he wants the whole board to go, then we advertise it and put it in the paper and say we're gonna be so-and-so.
I mean, the safest thing is not to have the quorum, because then you don't have the issue. But, if the board wants, let's look at all the options, and then you can decide how you want to,
Well,
look at the options and look at, the,
I get it.
look at the safe options.
We have quorums back there in the chicken room. We discuss business like how we're going to influence legislation. We need to quit doing that. But I get where this is going, and so I will say no more. I've been allowed to say my views. Your decision and your and Danny's decision.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
to,
the decision's gonna be made. Emerald, we're gonna
I'm gonna
check
give you-
into this thing, because I want it very clear about this quorum situation and what a meeting is, and who can go on what, and then we will.
Dan, you make it sound like it's somebody's personal decision. It's rules, it's laws. It's not up to me, it's not up to you, it's not up to Reverend
I'm
Copeland.
just simply saying that if members of this body care enough about what goes on here to go on a field trip with something that somebody calls a committee, they should be allowed to go. Should not just allowed, should be encouraged to go.
And I think you could advertise the committee is going on a field trip, and then if the press wants to show up there, because there are AG opinions, and I can't remember if there's decisions, but there are opinions that you don't have to meet in your home office. You can go meet in Dorchester County, if you want to, as long as you advertise it, and then it's up to the press to travel down. So you could advertise it, and there would be no question.
if,
That-
if you would have all of that when we discuss the bylaws and the new policies and whatever, because if we can have those opinions on what definitely is and what is questionable
And what we don't know.
and what we don't know, that then we could make that decision, because I have a great deal of respect for attorneys, but I don't like to pay them any more money than I have to, personally.
And you can be
Or-
liable for attorney's fees
or,
in these.
or business. So if it would be something And this would be my vote, or thinking on my vote, if it would be something that was questionable enough that we might have to pay attorney fees and go to court and this, that, and the other, it would be my choice to tender the bylaws to where that wasn't a necessity.
And some of it you could cure by posting the event.
Right, if you can advertise it and then do it, that would be great, and then you wouldn't have to worry about that. But I would like to see what is in stone, what is questionable, and
We'll
what we
lay
could do
that
to.
out for you. And
Thank
then
you.
y'all can decide what
If an interested but excluded member or anybody just showed up on their own on a field trip, would that then create some kind of problem?
I
They
would
just
argue
did it
it's
on
by
their own.
chance that-
They just showed up by chance. Thank you.
Or-
I want you to be my lawyer then.
That the non-quorum certainly didn't plan it.
Yeah, but
That's for sure.
that would be very hard to,
But then
very
you
hard
get
to
into-
prove.
Get into the practical problem of what the other side does with it.
Well,
Yeah, I think,
just say, Your Honor, I wanted to go down there and learn about composting, and I knew that some of us were going. I decided to go on my own. That, not, that I don't
It'd be an
think the judge would say
interesting
that.
We want to make a test case, make some law there.
And if you sprung your foot while down there, then you would say, well,
It's a workers' comp.
yeah. Okay, let's,
yeah, but, you know, I think the key issue that we're facing, that we faced, is, again, just like with committees, if we're gonna err, let's err on the side of safety. You know, let's be safe about whatever we decide if we don't have a clear-cut answer.
You'd have a couple of options. One would be the number, and the other would be posting.
There was also a statement to err on the side of transparency. I think that also is equal, right? The courts have liberalized
That's the purpose of it.
and if, when interpreting, they'll say, well, what falls on the side of being open to the public?
That's right.
Thank you.
As far as the trips are concerned, doesn't 2 trips solve that problem?
On the same
And
day
everybody
or on
get to
different-
go, and everybody gets to play, and everybody gets to go, and you don't have to worry about the quorum question. Isn't that a lot simpler?
Make 2 trips rather than just the,
Rather than, if
Or
if
3
there's
if
a
you have
question
to.
or a problem, make 2 trips. Let one group go one day, one group go the next day.
Or just let somebody decide to go on their own. It's also really the same thing, Mr. Jones.
All right, we'll have a session on that one.
Okay, you'll bring us information, and we'll deal with that when we get to the bylaws. We need to move on.
All right. There are some good, little, points in the board meetings about, sticking with your agenda. You have very good minutes. I don't think we need to spend any time on that. You have good reports, the motions, voting. Really don't see anything y'all need to be concerned about there. There's a helpful summary of parliamentary procedure on pages 52 and 53. There is a good evaluation tool, and part of this book, maybe later, talks about evaluation of yourself, of your meetings, and they have on 54 and 55 an evaluation tool for the meetings. And you can describe the meeting, and you can describe, kind of think about yourself if you do that as a self-evaluation there. 56 talks about planning ahead with a 12-month board agenda. Well, under FOIA, the monthly schedule is normally published at the beginning of the year anyway. Page 57, this section talks about accountability. Again, measuring outcome. It's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're doing today. Page 59, we have self-evaluation. And I think this has good checklists in it. I don't know that you need to establish new goals every year. A lot of nonprofits have fundraising goals, have to decide whether to make it more or whether the economy is such as to be less, who to target and all that. But you have continuous operations. And policies and mechanisms in place that unless something becomes outdated or outmoded, you're not going to have the same issue with goals. In effect, you will be doing some of that, I would think, with your solid waste management plan that you will be doing. And on pages 62 and 63, there is a board evaluation. And I think that's a good tool for kind of a self-analysis there. See how you do on that, and makes you think about your role as a board member. Beginning on page 64, dealing with problem board members. And what the author does here is we all have these different personality traits, okay? And so they take the problem with just different personality traits that kind of bug people or maybe monopolize board meetings or get board meetings off track. And I think we ought to just kind of run through these. First of all, we have the board member who likes to hear himself talk. Again, it goes into possible solutions that are polite to redirect the person, but probably the best thing to do is for everyone to read the problems and have a little bit of self-analysis, like, I sometimes do this, or, whatever. It is hard to make yourself aware of your own faults, I think, but I think as you get older sometimes, or maybe sometimes people let you know that you have that fault. It's just good to be more self-aware, but it is hard to do. So I recommend you read all of these and about how to deal with it. I do not think you have a problem with a board member who never comes prepared. I think you can save yourself the time reading that one because just from what I've seen, everybody is very prepared. There are times someone might want to talk and talk on and on, but I think once all of the relevant questions are asked, I think there are ways to move on, and there's some good examples of that. Frequent absences, again, that is one that I don't think you have that problem. So, you commend yourself there. Then the miser, we can't afford anything. I don't think I've seen that. I think you've all been very conscientious of the resources of the public and the authority, and you worked on being, doing your due diligence as far as spending in financial matters. However, if it comes to that, the author talks about the big picture spending discussion. You can do it at a planning retreat, but you have detailed presentations on the spending. If you have questions, they're answered, and it's usually a very short question-answer, factual type response with the information right there. A pessimist, the board member who has no vision for new programs or new ways of doing things. Possible solutions, I thought this was kind of funny, recruit better board members. I think, I don't know that I would say I've even seen that. I think people have different ideas about ways to spend money or what programs should be out there. Chime in if you think there's an issue we need to discuss on any of these. Some reluctance to change is a matter of human nature, and usually education resolves that, like informing someone of the benefits of the change, having information about where the change has been implemented elsewhere. I know y'all have been good about going to see new techniques, and I've had an open mind about different methods of waste disposal, and trying to stay up to date on what's being developed in the industry. A board member with a perpetual focus on one issue. And this occurs when a board member has an issue and can't let it go, and it crops up from time to time. Again, there are some suggestions made. If the board makes sure it has a thorough discussion, has answered questions, then, or if you've had a planning meeting, like they give the example, it says, we've answered the questions, we've been through this, it's time focus on our priorities, which are elsewhere. So there are ways to address these issues which come up, and then, maybe the board member sees, okay, I have been just dwelling on this one issue excessively, and there are other important things that need to be done. The financial expert, someone who knows about finances better than anybody else. Again, the board gets extremely detailed information presented in the reports that are in the packet, and there should be question and answer sessions. If it's becoming too excessive, then the board should take that up as to how can we better address this situation than spending too much time on it when it's laid out in front of you. A go-it-alone board member, when a member or stakeholder brings forward a problem, this person just unilaterally charges ahead to solve the problem. This would be a situation if you had a board member just taking off on their own without board authorization or without it going to the executive director to handle, and it would be up to the board to correct this and bring it back online. And then the new board member who now thinks that she is in charge of staff. And I think we've talked about that in detail about the chain of command, and it's a matter of just setting the standard, communicating it, and then making sure it is followed. Then on the next page, the board breaking up into cliques. Again, board members should always be open to each other. I think y'all do this, rearrange the nameplates from time to time at the table. Rearrange the nameplate. You rearrange the nameplates from at least at the end of each year, I believe, to address that. And you may want to look at if you feel like there are cliques, look at some other ways to change that. I think this meeting is an effort to have board members relate better and all with each other, full discussion among everybody, and I think this is an effort to address any issues there. And then a board member who doesn't trust the executive. Again, just like the author says, it is vital.
We can have him followed, can't we?
It is really important that you have an executive that you can trust. In this situation, you have
Can
an
we trust you?
executive who is an active participant in the meeting, who makes a report, who responds to questions, and if there are issues, then these should be brought up in the proper manner to build and maintain personal relationships. You don't want anything anything unsaid or thought or not put on the table getting in the way of the proper personal relationship. All right, the recruiting, that really is more the county council job there with the board members, but it does have a good checklist and some ideas about board qualifications that probably ought to be shared with the council at the time that it's making its decision. And then finally, kind of wrapping up, we have the section beginning on page 72, managing conflict on the board team. The author points out that healthy debate is good. It's okay to discuss the pros and cons. And it's okay to do that in a way with feeling and, to convince others. However, you should not have conflict that results in board members feeling alienated because of a position taken. And so we need to make sure the debate takes place in a manner in which everyone is respectful and no one gets angry or carries that over into other votes. Everyone has differences, everyone has different backgrounds and different life experiences. Everybody brings something unique to the table. And just as that uniqueness can be very helpful in being a good team, it can also cause some dissension or misunderstanding. And those situations should be quickly addressed and not allowed to smolder, and so everyone can work together. Again, if you have different goals, different positions, you work together agreeably to come to a consensus. And not everybody is going to have what they want adopted every time. And everybody just needs to realize that. As long as you've articulated your position, you have done your duty as a board member. As long as you've studied the information and you've done it on an informed basis. He sets forth some ideas for lists some ideas for dealing with conflict. And the first one is you have to accept the fact that you're going to disagree with others, and that others are going to disagree with you. And that is, like it says, failure to agree is not a disaster. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person because you don't disagree with me, and I should not take it that way. No one should take disagreement personally. It's just a method of getting to a consensus. Leave the conflict in the context in which it begins. You don't carry it forward. You don't carry it out of the room. If you carry it out of the room and take it home with you, it's going to make you an unhappy person and give you stress you don't need, okay? You really, and why? It doesn't do you any good anyway to take that out of the room with you. It needs to, when the vote is taken, you move on. You as board members should deal with your own conflicts. Nobody else can handle those for you. You can get someone who can maybe mediate or intervene or facilitate if things get to where something should arise where there is tremendous conflict. Future teamwork is more important than any single issue. And a compromise is not defeat. Compromise that works should be viewed as a win-win for the authority and for the board. While it says, remember your goal is to get board members to accept your point of view, but not just to make a lot of noise. Carrying conflict on and on, even when you know that issue is lost, results in others being reluctant to work with you and really affects credibility and can help render a board member ineffective. There's a good little test here. I looked at it. Are you a team player? And I think that's something everybody ought to, when they're in quiet time somewhere, go through this and give it like, you can just do it for yourself. Nobody else has to see it. Give yourself a real honest evaluation about whether you're a team player, because you have to grade yourself on it. That gives you a lot of self-insight. There are tests. You may want to go back, read the booklet, and take the test. There is an answer key, I believe, in the possession of...
There's one in the booklet as well.
Okay. All right.
There's one in the booklet as well.
And
The answer key that we gave out today is for the old booklet,
that's the old, okay, all right.
but there's one for the new booklet that's in there.
I wrote one point on 11-2 that really struck me. It's the second bullet on the right side. After the vote, the decision becomes team property, and you're part of the team.
That's a good point. Everybody has ownership in it because it's the decision of that's a good point, Danny. And everyone should act as though they have ownership in the decision.
Becomes team property.
Yes. It's not you and, it's not me versus them. It becomes us in terms of that ownership. That's a good point. All right, what other comments? Anybody has anything they want to say? Put on the table?
I'd like to say that I think that Emma Ruth Britton has done an outstanding job of being facilitator.
Thank you.
of this here roundtable.
I don't know about that, but this was a.
I had, this is a
topic for
hard,
me to deal
hard
with.
thing to do, and, you did, I'm like everybody else here, I've been through this sort of thing more than dozens of times, and you're among the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Anybody else? Reverend Copeland?
Any other comments on the workshop, on the booklet?
I appreciate us doing this.
Me too.
And I think some of these comments is gonna lead into when we get to the red line. And there'll be things that we have to add that come up, just like the meeting. So I look forward to the next meeting.
I think if you have, anybody has any, thoughts on changes, they probably ought to submit them if they can ahead of time. There may be things that come up in the meeting. That way it gives time for review and kind of reflection on them. If y'all want to give them to Reverend Copley or to me, you know, so that you have, a list of proposed changes that need additional.
That
In the,
meeting is the 31st at what time?
2.
2?
Microphone.
in the unlikely event that any one of us might not have or be able to find possession of where we were with that document, we can get another, there'll be copies, and I think it'll be a jump-off point.
You talking about the notebook?
No, sir, I was referring to the document we had prepared that, on or about this time last year.
You talking about the bylaws?
Yes, sir, the bylaw.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about also.
Tab 3.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll get those, at least we'll get those out
yeah. If
prior
you-
to the meeting.
Yeah, please, make sure that we try and get them out, at least, probably at least next week at the latest. Give us at least a week or two to look at them. Which brings me to 2 points. One, we know that we talked last time about the possibility of the August meeting needing to be changed because of the SWA conference. You know, we need to look at that, but also, there have been a couple of requests for us to look at changing the meeting date for this month because of some conflicts with the 22nd, which is our normally scheduled date, the fourth Tuesday. We're requesting, asking if anyone had objections to the 29th.
Let me flip to
Yes, sir.
my dumb phone here.
Did you find it?
Yes, I did. Thank you for asking. You know what happened? My dog ate my homework. He literally, really, it was under the back seat of my truck. Thank you for that.
And you picked it out and put it back together?
Well, once she found out it didn't taste good, she left it alone. But I did go to Office Depot and bought another one and started filling it out. But thank you for asking, Danny.
Yes, sir. Confirm.
Glad that word got around, and appreciate everybody helping me. Now, the question, the date in question was
The
what, sir?
question date was the 29th,
That would be
July.
July.
Tuesday.
I'm good.
Anyone has problems with it?
Is that a Tuesday?
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Okay, no,
That would be for.
You can't meet on Tuesday?
I can't.
Oh, okay.
What, is that to change the,
July meeting to the 29th.
okay, it was some other date scheduled, but 29th.
It was scheduled the 22nd, the fourth Tuesday.
Yes, sir, I'm fine, I'm good.
Any objections from anybody? Okay, August meeting date. Any recommendations? We're scheduled for the 22nd, 26th, but, you know, there's some folk who are going to the SWA conference.
What?
I said there are some folk who are requesting to go to the SWA conference.
Yes,
So the 26th is a bad date
yes, sir.
for the meeting, so we're asking for suggestions.
19th.
19th, is that a problem for anyone?
And I see that would be in August.
Yeah, let me check my baseball schedule.
Check your smartphone.
Well, I wasn't planning on going to, SWA anyway, so the 19th is, wait a minute, I do have a conflict. I'm sorry, Lance. Is there another date that would suit for you?
Lance,
Yeah, I'm looking.
okay.
So that whole week is out, that 25th through the 29th, that whole week's out, because that's the whole conference, right? So we'd have to go backwards.
Yeah, we have to
Right.
go backwards.
How about Monday night, the 18th?
That's fine with me.
That's fine. Excuse me, with me. Any objections to the 18th? August 18,
What time would that be?
5:30.
5:30?
August 18.
That takes the place of our regular August
Right,
meeting.
that would be in lieu of the 26th.
Yes, sir, at 5:30 on August 18th.
Okay. Okay, in view of that, if you have any issues, comments, recommendations in light of this workshop in preparation for the bylaws meeting, we need to get those in no later than what date? The 17th, to give you 2 weeks? No later than the 17th.
I have a question not related to that before you move on.
Okay. I'll come to you in just a minute.
Yes, sir.
Make sure we get in comments, so we can get those, and we can make sure everyone gets a copy of what we're gonna be looking at before we get here on the 31st for that meeting. Okay? Mr. Gray?
What use will be made of that form we first filled out? For instance,
This right here?
the one where I put down, why am I here?
Yeah, we're gonna do actually a little booklet, for us.
Everybody to look at?
Yeah,
Oh, great.
yeah,
I'd be interested in knowing what everybody says.
okay,
So,
but yeah.
well, we're gonna have that for,
Hopefully I'll have these by the meeting, by our regular meeting. This is just simply a little, a board profile for us
Yeah.
on each other.
I agree. That's
Okay.
great. I mean,
And anybody who wants to submit a picture to go with their profile, I'll do that as well. Anybody who wants to submit a picture to go with your profile, we'll, give it to me as well. Yeah. When I do things, I do it right.
I got one of you, Mr. Gray.
Don't you show those pictures,
I'll
Danny.
submit
You
it.
told me you were never gonna.
Send it to me, Danny, let's put it in.
I was not hugging that commode now. I want you to.
Mike,
No,
Yes,
you're
sir.
not. You're just joshing me, aren't you?
no, I'm not, I'm serious, send me
You
a
gonna make a
picture.
little book?
Yes,
What are you gonna do with it? I mean, what are we
it's
gonna?
just for us,
Oh, kind of a little directory of each one?
right.
Well, everybody knows what I look like. Be all right.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make sure that the board was aware that the Technical Advisory Council is going to be meeting on August the 6th. We'll get the exact time out. We're looking at right around 9 o'clock currently. Part of that meeting will be a presentation by HDR to the Technical Advisory Committee on alternatives to disposal. They're going to be looking at they'll give the Technical Advisory Committee a review of some of the technologies out there that's available and the processes that they use to educate the Technical Advisory Committee.
And that date again is?
August 6th at 9 o'clock. We think it's going to be right around 9, but it's probably 9:30 that morning.
Here?
Yes, sir.
What time you say?
It'll be around 9:30. We ain't set the exact date yet. We're trying to get the agenda put together, but right now we're looking at 9 o'clock.
Thank you. We'll send that out when you get it together.
Yes, sir.
And we're inviting,
We invited all the elected officials of Horry County as well to come that day to see those same things. So we hadn't sent that email out yet, but we'll be sending that out as well. We're gonna invite them to come and look at it and listen to them and encourage them. That's about the best we can do.
We'll have lunch and then we'll start another meeting after.
At lunch, we'll have lunch at noon, and then the disaster debris plan will be looked at and presented for an update that afternoon at 1:30, starting at 1:30. So it's gonna be a full day event.
So the second meeting's topic will be what?
Disaster debris plan update.
Oh. In case storm comes in, where are you gonna put it?
Yeah, and we're gonna invite all the cities to send somebody to represent them to have input into that.
And that's at 1 o'clock,
That's at 1 o'clock.
August 6th.
Yes, sir.
That's gonna mess up the deer hunting.
Gonna be a full day. They have to go early that morning, and when the sun comes up, they stop anyway. They can come and set the rest of the day with us. Unless they got one.
Let's not forget that on August 5th, the environmental luncheon will be here, environmental luncheon.
Who's gonna be the guest this time?
The individuals who are receiving rewards, am I right, Esther?
Cindy Ellsbury is speaking.
Who's
The guest speakers who?
Cindy Ellsbury.
Cindy Ellsbury.
Oh,
Dr.
excellent.
Cindy Ellsbury, the
Great.
Are we good?
superintendent.
And that's August 5th,
I'm gonna send you one, make sure.
August 5th.
See if you respond.
noon time.
Looks like we're gonna be having a lot of meetings this month, next.
Yeah.
That one's at 12 noon, right?
12 noon, right, Esther?
But we're gonna encourage all the elected officials to come to that educational workshop where they get a good understanding of what all these buzzwords mean and somewhat what the cost, how it's done.
I
help
think
us-
you ought to put the word out that they charge $66 a ton in Charleston County for what we do, and in Brunswick County, it's how much?
58.
58.
Yes, sir.
I mean, the sooner we start putting the word out, that Georgetown County, what do they charge?
38.
I mean, it ain't right.
Yes.
That we are expected to do all the things and slide $2 off to them and all that kind of stuff,
Amen.
and working with the lowest tipping fees around us.
And as I've talked to some of the council members, they might as well come and see what it is, listen, because there ain't nothing gonna be less than $29 a ton. If anything, you looking at doubling up.
Well, you can't buy dirt for $29 a ton hardly, so.
We bought a lump, 6 million. And by the way, the plastic going down on the hill, they're doing a great job. Wish we could got out of here and seen it today, but you need to try to get out here and we'll drive you around and show you while they're working. It is, it's fascinating to watch, and, I can see now why it's so expensive.
Talking about the line,
Yes, sir.
they going pretty good?
Yeah, going good. The contractor did a lot of preventive maintenance stuff, getting ready for the hurricane and the rain, and it worked out. It worked out well, diverting water and put some pipe in
I
and,
know Vance Moore was here for that last meeting. I know he was here for putting down the line. Either he or somebody from
oh yeah, they 2 or 3 hats on the job all day long.
that comes from his office.
The cost of that preventive maintenance was at the contractor's cost too. It wasn't something that he's gonna bill us for later. He
Say that again, Mike.
he paid for it himself. It's not, we won't get a change order on the preventive stuff that he did for the, that was his doing. So,
Got it.
He certainly didn't want to come the next morning, that liner washed off down there in Sterrett Swamp. Ooh-wee.
Anything else?
Like to thank, Ms. Creek for the refreshments that she brought in.
Thank you
here
very much.
today.
Want to thank her for the refreshments, and thank Emma Ruth for doing an excellent job. And as far as I'm concerned, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, sir.